Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. Today, we got another episode of reviewing NHL teams offseason so far, as today, we got the Toronto Maple Leafs ahead of us, as we're going to be taking a look at their kind of rough offseason, I guess, but also good at the same time. It's like a mix of both. They lost some good players, but, they got some decent players back, and not so good players. So before we get all into that, I'd like to just say, if you are new to the channel, make sure to stop that subscribe button and hit that like button as well. That'll be very much appreciated. And if you haven't already, make sure to go check out my Discord server as well. The link will be down in the description below. So let's get into talking about the Toronto Maple Leafs offseason, as they made a decent amount of moves, picking up Nick Ritchie, Ondrej Kase, Michael Bunting, which I really enjoyed this move. I love Michael Bunting, and I think he's going to be a phenomenal player for the Toronto Maple Leafs. But before we get into that, we're going to talk about the trades. You know the usual routine. We'll get into the trades and talk about them. And also, Peter Marazzic, they also picked up during free agency as well, which I was not a big fan about. So we'll get into that a little bit later on. But let's get into the trades. So right off the get-go, the Toronto Maple Leafs traded away Philip Heinlander and a 7th-round pick to pick up Jared McCann, and basically lost him to the Kraken. And I'm not joking. They picked him up to practically secure Kerfoot, which, in my opinion, I'm not a big fan of Alexander Kerfoot. I really am not a big fan of Kerfoot. $3.5 million for a guy who, has been mediocre at best for the past 2 seasons for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Was alright during the playoffs, but this was the one move that mind-boggled me. And watching the All or Nothing documentary, where Kyle Dubas practically said that they're picking up Jared McCann to basically protect Kerfoot, was dumb. That was legit the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Jared McCann would have been a great third-line player for the Toronto Maple Leafs, and is a player that they actually need. David Kemp, who they just picked up, is not that good. And, Jared McCann could have actually been their third-line centerman. And at the, the cap that he was at, it was dirt cheap. He was really good for the Pittsburgh Penguins. He would have been phenomenal for their third line. He could have even been like a second-line winger if needed be. So, I thought this move wasn't a very smart move by Kyle Dubas. Plus, you lose out on an asset when you could have just, let go of Kerfoot and did some other moves and maybe even traded for Jared McCann. This was not a very good move. It wasn't very smart. You lost out on this deal. Plus, you lost out on Jared McCann. Not a very smart move. Big thumbs down for this one. Their draft was alright. I didn't really hear a lot of positive reviews about their draft. It was alright. So we'll move right into their free agency, because there wasn't a whole lot to talk about with their draft. So we'll get down to the nitty-gritty with their free agency. So, right off the get-go, Wayne Simmonds, 2 years, $900 million. Yeah, that's not a true number. $900,000 for Wayne Simmonds. I like the deal. He was a gritty guy, real true guy in the locker room. I think it was a player that, energized the group a little bit. Nice deal for 2 years for, Wayne Simmonds, who threw up some decent numbers the past year. He's all right. Having him in for, 50, 60 games to give you some energy is not a bad idea. He's not going to be a massive point producer, of course. His old point producing games is, days are kind of gone. He's definitely not going to be a top line winger for you. He's going to be a guy that goes out there, bangs the body for a good 10 minutes, and that's really what he's going to be doing for you. Jason Spencer, who was phenomenal last year, got another 1-year deal at $750,000. He just really loves Toronto, it seems like, and he takes another steal of a deal, I gotta say, for Jason Spencer. Travis Dermot, he's been all right, but he's definitely not been a phenomenal defenseman there for the Toronto Maple Leafs. He signed another 2 years, $1.5 million deal. This is kind of a prove me or not deal. Is Travis Dermot really going to be the guy that they were expecting or not? They kind of need, another defenseman to jump up, since Justin Hall is all right up in that top 4. And that's also the biggest problem. They really didn't pick up, any defenseman throughout this past free agency, nor did they have a lot of money. But I felt like they needed that one top 4 guy to really solidify a solid defensive core going into this upcoming season. They do re-sign Travis Dermot at a decent deal. Like, this is definitely the value for Travis Dermot. I would like to see him take another big step up this upcoming season, and I'm excited to see that if he does. And then Michael Bunting, who I think is going to be a phenomenal player for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Last year, he put up 10 goals in 21 games for the Arizona Coyotes, which is pretty damn impressive. And I feel like he's just going to take another step up. You know, from the games I've been seeing from preseason, he plays really good alongside John Tavares. And I know, that could be preseason hockey, but I mean, the guy threw up 10 goals in 21 games with the Arizona Coyotes. So I could see him throwing up a lot of goals once, you know, the regular season gets going and he's starting to maybe play alongside Tavares or play alongside of Matthews and Marner, who knows. But for the contract, they're giving him $950,000 for 2 years for a depth scoring player that could maybe potentially play in the top 6. That's a steal of a deal, if you ask me. David Kemp, I'm not a big fan of this one. He is not a very good player. You know, looking at him analytically, his defense is not that great, and especially since they need a proper third-line guy. Picking up David Kemp for that amount of money is just not worth it. It really isn't, especially when you had Jared McCann, who could have been that third-line guy for you. Now he's, of course, he got taken by the Seattle Kraken. It kind of sucks. So David Kemp is kind of being their third, fourth liner, which I'm not too big of a fan of. He's all right, but I don't have a lot of belief in him being that third line guy that they actually properly need. He's not very well defensively. His offensive game is all right. He's just an all right player. You know, he belongs in the fourth, maybe as a depth player, but definitely not as a third line guy. And that's one of the other moves I did not like. Peter Marazzic. This guy's a big mystery. He really is, because Peter Marazzic has put up some big numbers. And if you ask Perlo, his link will be down in the description below. Peter Marazzic, Perlo really doesn't like Peter Marazzic. And for me, I'm on the fence of Peter Marazzic. This guy, you know, he's has some years where he's red hot, some years where he's just dead cold. You know, if you look at a lot of his stats, where you see right here, his 3 years there in Carolina, he's been kind of, you know, inconsistent. He's been throwing up a lot of numbers over these years. You know, wasn't too great in the playoffs, but was all right during the regular season. And in the regular season next year, he was just, you know, he's just fine. But then the next year, you know, he got injured, but he still did pretty good during the regular season. This is a big kind of, I don't know. The goaltending there in Toronto is definitely going to be taking a big hit, I feel, especially losing Frederik Andersen. And I know Frederik Andersen was kind of going downhill. And yeah, you got Jack Campbell, but Jack Campbell just had that one good season. He hasn't, you know, put up anything else but for that. You know, he's been all right backup-wise, but that was his first kind of full season taking that starting role for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Can he do it again going into year 2 here? And then also, can Peter Marazzic be a good tandem alongside of Campbell? And I think that's the biggest question for the Toronto Maple Leafs going into this upcoming season. Can this tandem be what they wanted to be? Because that's the biggest question. If Marazic's not in full Marazzic beast mode, then the Toronto Maple Leafs are going to be an all-right team. And that's the same with Jack Campbell. If both of these goalies don't perform to the way that they were last year, this team is not going to be a very good team coming into this year. They are reliant a big time about their goaltending, and Freddie Andersen was a big reason why they did really good for the years, you know, that they did good. Was because Frederik Andersen was absolutely amazing goalie up until, you know, he had to deal with some injury problems, and he just did not look himself throughout this past season. So I think Peter Marazzic is an all-right signing, 3.8 for the next 3 years. You know, it's a little long, especially for goalies. They're always a little voodoo, so we'll have to see how Marazzic does in Toronto. And I'm excited to see if he's going to do good or not. That's the biggest question. And then Andre Kasha, great bet signing. I really did enjoy this one. 1 year at 1.25. And then Nick Ritchie signing 2 year, $2.5 million deal. Now we're going to be taking a look at his analytics. Make sure to go check out my boy Jfresh. His link will be down in the description below, as we're using one of his analytic cards here for Nick Ritchie. And Nick Ritchie's been a solid player. You know, I think he's going to be a good role player for the team. You play all up and down the lineup. He's going to give you some decent offense, decent defense. But the biggest thing, he's going to be a physical guy. Now, he's going to take a lot of dumb penalties, and that might be the biggest hindrance of Nick Ritchie. that he's going to go in the box a decent amount. He might take some dumb penalties, but his offensive game is pretty solid. He's a guy that, on the second unit for the power play for the Toronto Maple Leafs, or if you need to throw him up in the first unit and he could play the big body guy in front of the net, he could do that. And I think this was a really good signing for the Toronto Maple Leafs. They got a physical guy, which I think they needed. And honestly, on a 2-year, $2.5 million contract, that's not going to hurt them very much, honestly. And I quite like, he's going to fit, I think, in the roster pretty well. Either he's going to be playing up on the top line with Auston Matthews, or on the second line, or maybe down the third line. So, honestly, the Toronto Maple Leafs, they did all right. Definitely not the greatest offseason in the world, especially since you lost Zach Hyman, who I thought was an amazing player for the Toronto Maple Leafs, especially playing up on that top line. Frederik Andersen's also another big loss, no matter which way you look at it. He's just a big loss for them. But looking at their forward core, with Michael Bunting maybe playing up in the top 6, I think their only weak side is maybe their top 9. How well will Kemp do? Is he going to be a defensive liability? Will he be able to produce a little bit? This is the biggest question, I think, for them, is can they actually get a third liner? Will David Kemp be that actual third liner that they need him to be? How well will Kerfoot do? I think their depth is going to be a big question, but I think with Spencer and, Bunting down here and Mikheyev, maybe even Ritchie if he does go down here, I think they'll be fine. They got tons of secondary scoring from their top 6 to even their bottom 6 here with, Kerfoot, who could throw up 10, 15 goals this season. Same with Simmons, who could probably throw up another 10 goals this year. Maybe. But Bunting is going to be a big question, I think, this year. I think this is the biggest X factor going forward this year, is if this guy can throw you another, 10, 20 goals this upcoming season, this will be a big reason why they have a lot of success, I think, because they need a top 6 guy. They need another top 6 winger to be that guy. It'll either be Nick Ritchie, who I think will, throw up another 15, 20 goals, or it'll be Michael Bunting, who jumps up into that top 6 and becomes a big key player. Their defense is the same thing, and I like to see how well Rasmus Sandin will jump into their lineup this year. He was all right for the Toronto Maple Leafs. He's probably going to take another step in his development. And then their goaltending, I think that's also a big question going into this upcoming season. How well will their goaltending perform? So, a lot of big questions for the Toronto Maple Leafs. A lot of big what-ifs, basically, with this team going into this year. Are they going to make it out of the first round? Are a lot of players that they picked up, will they actually be good? Will they perform for the team? There's a lot of big questions with the team, and I don't particularly like a lot of the moves, like David Kemp, like choosing Kerfoot over McCann. I thought that was dumb. I like the Bunting move, though. The Bunting move I thought was really good. Nick Ritchie's move was really good. It sucks that you lost in Zach Hyman, but getting Bunting and Ritchie and Kasha back, I think that's honestly pretty good. You didn't have to spend big bucks on getting Zach Hyman back. You filled in the rest of the roster with, the remaining money that you didn't want to spend on Zach Hyman. So I'm honestly going to give this team, I think I'm going to go with a B-. There's a lot of things that I like about it, but there's a lot of things that I hate about it. And I'm going to go with a B- here for the Toronto Maple Leafs. They did all right, but it definitely wasn't the greatest offseason in the world. So for right now, guys, I'm going to end the video here. Thank you very much for watching, boys. Tell me, guys, in the comment section below what you guys thought of the Maple Leafs offseason, and I'll be seeing you guys all in the next one. Adios, amigos.